Good morning. I'm Emily Ketta. Joe and Savannah are on assignment. We begin our show with the financial markets, which continue to slide after President Trump's newly imposed tariffs sparked a trade war and heightened the risk of a global economic recession. And just this morning, China announced it was retaliating by slapping a 34% tariff on all goods imported from the U.S. from April 10th. The measure started a worldwide sell-off on Thursday, with U.S. stocks seeing their biggest one-day drop since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic 5 years ago. The S&P 500 suffered a $2 trillion wipeout in what was a disastrous day for markets. And the financial turmoil is showing no signs of slowing this morning. Asian markets closed deep in the red, with European stocks also currently down. While here in the U.S., the Dow futures are pointing to another day of losses. Speaking on Air Force One yesterday, the president downplayed the market moves and said the tide will eventually turn.
It's to be expected. This is a patient that was very sick. We really inherited a terrible economy that went through an operation on Liberation Day, and it's going to be a booming country.
Joining us now to talk more about all this is NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Okay, Brian, it's good to have you with us. It's shaping up to be another rocky day. I think a lot of people this morning, they're thinking about their retirement savings invested in stocks and bonds. So is there cause for concern here, or is this just a case of holding your nerve?
Yeah, and especially after that China announcement, now we're seeing market futures really tumble farther. In fact, markets looking like they might open 3% down once the bell starts at 9:30 Eastern time. So, yeah, for a lot of those that are holding on to a stock portfolio, they're saying, oh, my gosh, what is going on here? When are we going to see the end of this? And the answer is we just simply don't know. Until we get more certainty on the tariffs, it's unlikely to stop the volatility. So to that point, the idea here is to stay the course. If you have an investment thesis here where you're squirreling money away for retirement accounts for maybe 20 or 30 years from now, don't pull that money early just because you have a few bad days on the stock market. In fact, some people might say this actually offers the ability to get stocks at a cheaper discount. But for those that are nearing retirement, that were looking at taking money out of the market anyway, talk to your financial advisor to see if there's any sort of asset allocations that could really help you maximize whatever you do want to take out. And lastly, I want to say use high yield savings accounts. Interest rates are still relatively higher now than they were a few years ago. So just having your cash, even if it's saved away, getting 3 to 4% on a high yield savings account is probably a good idea.
Yeah, good point there. And I think economists are just beginning to wrap their minds around this. Obviously, there's concern here in the U.S., but just how much of a shock is this around the world? Yeah, well, I mean, for the past few weeks, we were talking about the U.S. trade negotiations with Canada and Mexico and China. But now with these reciprocal or so-called reciprocal tariffs, now this is really bringing into the fold every country around the world, because there's that baseline of 10% on top of what they call those reciprocal tariffs. So for that reason, you have a number of economists that are now saying this has really added to the global risk of recession, not just in the United States, but around the world. I mean, Emily, it's so interesting. JP Morgan just had a note yesterday saying that they've increased the odds of a global recession from 40 to 60%. Wow. So this is a big deal, and definitely something that can't be just kind of shuffled under the rug. Yeah, absolutely. And I know one of the things that you've been digging into is the impact of these tariffs on consumers, the price of goods. So what can we expect? Yeah, well, global recession risk, that's still a lot of economic speak. But when it comes to just the prices that you pay at the store, again, because it's so wide ranging, it can make everything from toys to electronics a lot more expensive. I spoke to some folks about exactly when and how much they could expect those price increases to hit consumers.
President Trump says his sweeping tariffs on imports will level the playing field for American companies making products in the USA.
And today we're standing up for the American worker, and we are finally putting America first.
But for American consumers, it could mean higher prices on some of the most well-known brands that make their products overseas, if they pass the cost of the tariff on to their customers. By one estimate, higher prices will cost the median household $690 annually. In electronics, Best Buy says they source about 55% of their products from China, and analysts estimate Apple assembles the majority of its iPhones there. In apparel, Nike made half its footwear last year in Vietnam, where Adidas also sourced the largest share of its goods. Tariffs impacting furniture, too. Wayfair says its products come from China and 5 Southeast Asian countries facing tariffs. And one of the bigger categories that could get hit, toys.
Tonka Steel Classics.
Basic Fun, maker of Care Bears and Tonka trucks, says a majority of their products are made in China.
A $29.99 Tonka Mighty Dump Truck, which is our classic, one of our most classic items,
That will be a $39.99 Tonka truck this Christmas. There's no other way around it.
Basic Fun saying there are no factories in the U.S. that can make what they sell.
And there's no production here in the United States to shift to.
But in Ohio, the CEO of toy maker Simplay 3 tells us he supports the tariffs.
Bringing American jobs back here, that's really important.
His company makes all their products here in the U.S., so he says they won't have to raise their prices.
We're building it right here. We've got a strong workforce and the ability for the consumer to purchase it the same price that it was at Christmas time. I think they appreciate that.
The Trump administration also closing a loophole on the tax-free treatment of goods shipped directly from China, meaning those discounted Shein and Temu products will likely get pricier too.
Okay, Brian, so let's talk tips. What can we do to avoid some of these price increases?
Yeah, well, it's going to depend on category because for things like food, you can't stock up on a bunch of perishables that are just going to go bad anyway. But the categories like chocolate, coffee, wine as well, those could get more expensive as this tariff war ratchets up. So if you see a good price, maybe snag some of that. Electronics prices could also get more expensive, especially if you think about the timing of this. Maybe it's around the holidays that the full brunt of these tariffs will make smartphones or laptops hundreds of dollars more expensive. And then cars. This is a big one. I spent the entirety of Tuesday at a car dealership, and car dealers were telling me, prices might not go up necessarily in the next few weeks, but in a matter of months, it won't be long before you start to see perhaps thousands of dollars added to the cost of a new vehicle, as much as $15,000 for some foreign imports. So again, if you're trying to make that big ticket purchase, perhaps buying sooner rather than later is not a bad idea. But I want to point out, don't panic. Don't buy anything you don't need because, especially for right now, budget is still really important.
All right, Brian Chung, staying on top of all of it for us. We'll continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Turning now to the turnover in the federal government continues as President Trump has fired at least 3 members of his National Security Council this week. The firings happened after the president met with far-right activist Laura Loomer, who expressed dissatisfaction with some officials on his national security team. This is according to 3 people familiar with the matter. This comes as we're also learning Air Force General Timothy Hawk and his deputy have been dismissed from their roles at the National Security Agency, the nation's chief cyber intelligence and electronic eavesdropping agency. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake joins us now with more on this. Garrett, good morning. You're going to break it all down for us. Let's begin with the firings we learned about last night at the National Security Agency. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, Emily, we don't know nearly as much as we would like in this case, candidly. The White House has offered no explanation for why these 2 career national security officials were removed from their posts yesterday. But the answer may be in that fact that these were career officials, each having served decades, including throughout the Biden presidency and having worked closely with some of the military and intelligence officials with whom the president views in great distaste, like former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley. We know they were also targeted by Laura Loomer, the far-right activist who's raised a series of complaints with the president about staffing within his administration, arguing that there are career officials throughout the government, even those placed by the Trump administration, who are somehow disloyal to him. And so these firings occurring late yesterday and no official explanation of any kind from the White House or the NSA so far.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, this is not the first time Laura Loomer has been in the President Trump's ear. We know she met with the president in the Oval Office on Wednesday. What do we know was discussed during the meeting and who was let go?
Yeah, Loomer has been a controversial figure in and around Trump world for years. Some folks might remember even during the campaign, she was traveling with the president just before his debate with Vice President Harris. That caused a lot of alarm in Trump world that some of her more controversial views might end up coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. She met with the president on Wednesday and raised, she says, complaints about some folks in the president's national security staff. We later learned that at least 3 officials there had been fired, although the president said yesterday these facts aren't related to one another. Listen to the president here on Air Force One.
So Laura Loomer is a very good patron. She is a very strong person.
What did she recommend?
She recommended certain people for jobs.
Adding to the administration, not
Adding.
Who did she
not
recommend?
firing?
Well, she'll recommend that too. But yesterday she recommended some people for jobs.
Did she have anything to do with the NSC aides who were ousted?
No.
Emily, the president and Loomer's recollections there contradict, and frankly, I think we should view the president's comments there with an enormous grain of salt unless and until his administration provides a better explanation for why these people were summarily fired yesterday.
Okay, Garrett, so the Pentagon has announced that its Inspector General will investigate Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's role in the Signal app chat leak that, of course, happened last month. This comes after the editor-in-chief for The Atlantic was inadvertently added to a Signal group that had sensitive information regarding military actions in Yemen. So what information is the Inspector General looking for here?
Yeah, here we have an acting inspector general after the most recent full-time occupant of that job was fired by the Trump administration. He says he's responding to a letter from senators asking him to look into, in this case, quite narrowly, the Secretary of Defense's role in this group chat, the secretary's conduct, his commentary, whether it complied with rules on classification and keeping relevant information secret during military operations, and perhaps to look broader at whether the DOD's rules comply with the rest of the governments. There's no timeline for when that report will be completed, but it will be due back to Congress, so we should see at least some of it eventually, Emily.
Garrett, covering it all for us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
You bet.
It's been a tough and frightening week across the Midwest and the South as severe weather has left a trail of devastation, and it's not over yet. At least 7 people have died, 5 in Tennessee, 1 in Indiana, and 1 in Missouri, and more than a dozen are injured. As you can see, buildings have been destroyed, trees are down, and thousands remain without power due to the nonstop severe storms that have spawned tornadoes. This all comes as a potentially historic flood threat continues this weekend for the mid-Mississippi and Ohio valleys, with millions of Americans waking up under flood alerts this morning. Joining us now with the latest on this wicked spring weather is NBC News correspondent George Solis. He's live in Paducah, Kentucky. George, good morning. What are you seeing on the ground there now, and how are people coping with the aftermath of these severe storms?
Yeah, hey, good morning, Emily. We're in downtown Paducah right now, where the scenery isn't just beautiful. That wall there is a mural, but behind it is the Ohio River. And what you want to know, need to know, is that what people are closely looking at is how much rain is going to fall here over the next several days and how high that river will get. Now, at this moment, it does not look like this wall will reach that flood stage where they need to put those floodgates in. However, officials, of course, not taking any chances. As you may be able to see, rain is starting to fall here in Kentucky, and we're expecting to see that over the next several days. The other big story here, of course, was the tornado damage here. Now, the National Weather Service reporting that it appears an EF2 tornado touched down here between McCracken County, where we are, and Ballard County, where it is the neighboring county. Now, we spent a good amount of time in both of these counties yesterday. Seems 2 churches were sort of the epicenter of these twisters. One of them destroying a sanctuary of a church. Fortunately, there was no one in there. Pastor telling us, we made the decision to close the day before to not hold any services. It ended up being the right call. Now, in Ballard County, this is where it gets a little sad. This is where one of the injuries from this area came from. There was a family that apparently sought to seek shelter from one of the twisters underneath a carport by a church there. The storm overtaking that area, and unfortunately an 8-year-old child was critically injured. He was rushed to a hospital there, and I do believe from the local sheriff there was some video that was released. Actually, let me take that back. That video came from McCracken County, from that other church. Either way, there is a lot of video circulating out there of just the harrowing scenes that were unfolding here in the overnight hours as those twisters moved through. And again, as I'm standing here, rain's starting to pick up now, and we are looking at, again, just that significant rainfall over the next several couple of days, which, of course, is, again, a big concern for the residents here when you talk about that flash flooding. Emily?
And, George, to your point, how are authorities urging people to prepare for this weekend's weather?
Yeah, always have a plan. They're actually calling on residents to make sure things like storm gutters, those storm drains are clear, right? Anything that will help with those waters, help them recede as quickly as possible. Because, again, as we've seen some localized flash flooding. These are areas that are already prone. But when you talk about the big flooding event here, again, when you talk about the river and how that may play a role, you have mitigation factors like the wall here behind me that will keep the waters at bay. But again, it just really depends on just how quickly that rainfall and just how prolonged that event's going to be, Emily.
George Solis in Kentucky for us. Thanks so much for staying on top of this, George. And much more weather is on the way this morning. Let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Angie Lassman. Angie, good morning. What's the outlook this morning?
Hi, Emily. Good morning to you. Unfortunately, George, exactly right in saying that this is going to be a prolonged event. We've got multiple more days of these same kind of impacts that we've been dealing with. over the same areas. This is what's most concerning, right? We've got potential to see more of that heavy rain and severe weather through some of those same areas today. So here's what's going on right now. The heavy rain, it has been ongoing, and we're really waking up to some soggy conditions again for folks in Lexington, Beckley, back up into parts of the Northeast as well, and back towards sections of the South, including Texas and Oklahoma. So no surprise that we've got expansive flood alerts at this hour. 38 million people. Today, we are once again going to see that repeat performance of the heavy rain working through and the potential for more of that flooding. And you can see why. We've got really saturated soils. As we look back to Wednesday morning, we've got more than 4 inches that have fallen in Jackson. We've got nearly 4 inches in Nashville, almost 4 inches in Hot Springs. Check out Memphis, nearly 7 inches of rain since Wednesday morning. And unfortunately, there's more on the way. Here's what we're looking at as far as additional rainfall. We've got the potential for 3 to 5, even up to 7 inches. Where you see this darker shaded red, that's 7 inches of additional rain for Jonesboro, Little Rock. You see Paducah in that 5-inch range. But we could see localized amounts up to 10 inches. That puts us basically at totals, when this is all said and done through the weekend, upwards of maybe 15 inches in some spots. So over a foot of rain in a very short period of time. That means that the flash flooding is not only going to be widespread, but you're going to see flooding concerns in places that don't normally flood. We'll likely see some water rescues. We'll likely see road closures. It will be life-threatening, and potentially by the time we wrap up the weekend, historic flash flooding across this area. Texarkana to Paducah, you're in the high risk through Sunday. We've got Nashville in that moderate risk. Basically, if you are anywhere in the blue or pinks, you've got a concern for flash flooding. Specifically, that lighter pink is where we're most concerned. As we look ahead, though, to this afternoon, we're going to ramp up that severe threat again. We've got the chance to see long-lived supercells develop specifically into the late afternoon hours and, unfortunately, over those same areas. So we've got Evansville to San Antonio included in it, but where you see the moderate risk, Little Rock. You're right in the center of that, right in the bullseye. We'll see those tornadoes likely once again, and a couple of them could be strong. The hail, the wind gusts on the table as well. Texarkana, Shreveport, Jonesboro, Memphis. These are the locations that once again are going to want to have a way to get those alerts through this afternoon, and even into the overnight periods, we'll still see this active. Tomorrow, no rest for the weary. We've got another round of these severe storms that develop, and we've got that highest tornado threat really centered from Tennessee down through Texas, including Louisiana, Mississippi, and parts of Arkansas, and just a sliver of Missouri. Either way, the biggest threat is going to be the tornadoes again, and EF2 will be possible, specifically Alexandria to Greenville, including Monroe. But that tornado risk is expansive, Emily. This is going to be something that we see last through tomorrow, of course, with the severe weather. But we've got the prolonged rain event that'll go through the weekend. So the flooding concern will be with us through Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, for some of these communities, it's a 1, 2, even 3 plunge.
You're exactly right.
Really trying to get the message out. Thanks so much, Angie.
Of course.
All right, we are now just hours away from the deadline to determine TikTok's future in the U.S. President Trump has said he's confident that the White House will find a buyer for the app before tomorrow's deadline. So with the clock ticking on a national TikTok ban again, here's Morning News Now anchor Savannah Sellers with more on what to watch.
Hey, Em, thanks for holding down the fort. Good morning from a windy Palm Beach. I am here because President Trump is here at Mar-a-Lago. And the reason that we are here, of course, is because we are waiting on this TikTok announcement. Vice President J.D. Vance, who has been tasked with leading these discussions, has repeatedly said that President Trump will be a part of this announcement. So we are anticipating that we could get that today or tomorrow. Now, of course, tomorrow is that deadline. We've also heard from both of these gentlemen that they do plan to have an announcement for us by that deadline. So in theory, that would mean by some point tomorrow. What we're really waiting on to hear here is who the president essentially is choosing to win this bid for TikTok. We have seen so many people throw their hat in the ring, even as late as this week, including a huge name, Amazon, also OnlyFans, a company called AppLovin. There's been a Wyoming billionaire named Reed Reisner who's raised about $50 billion, Frank McCourt and Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. And then one bid that has been getting quite a bit of attention, which would see existing U.S. investors in TikTok join with people like Larry Ellison, like Mark Andreessen, like Blackstone, to kind of put together this group to take over from any Chinese investors in the company. Now, there are huge open questions here, Emily. I really mean huge. First of all, does what they're planning satisfy the law? Under some reporting right now, we are seeing that there's a potential that China remains in some way, and the all-important algorithm for the app is essentially leased from ByteDance. Does that take away those national security concerns? We will have to see. We are also, of course, waiting to hear from China and from ByteDance. ByteDance has only ever said on the record it is not for sale. We do believe that the Trump administration would be working directly with the Chinese government, with President Xi. And even as recently as yesterday, President Trump mentioned that this could be tied to tariffs, that should China allow a TikTok deal to go through, he would give China a reduction in tariffs. Could that be a motivating factor here? We will see. But we are on alert for any type of press conference, any type of Truth Social post, any type of comment as he's headed somewhere today, the president. So we will, of course, be on it for you all day. Back to you.
Still so many outstanding questions, Savannah. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.